Hello and welcome to The Lion Show. I'm your host, your favorite business coach, Robert Lyon. And today we have the great privilege of talking to Paul Artale. He is a motivational speaker, incredible human being, and I'm just super excited to have him on the show today. So Paul, why don't you introduce yourself and just kind of tell everybody, who you are, what you're up to.
Thanks, Robert. My name is Paul Artale. I am a motivational speaker, life coach, and researcher on all things having to do with creating the life you want. And in a nutshell, how I came into motivational speaking and how I started this journey is I was born with what some would call a physical disability. I was just born the way I was born, in my opinion. So I'm missing fingers, have short forearms. So for those that are watching, right, like my left hand is like the Ninja Turtle, my right hand is like the Lego Man, and that's how I was born. And I had a dream of playing college football. And in high school, I was cut in my senior year from the team. And 6 years later, I walked on and played defensive end for the University of Toronto, and that was led to a career, not just playing college football, but also coaching college football for many years. And it's just that was my entry point of motivational speaking, life coaching, and the other things that I do. So it's been a great journey, but that's who I am in a really short minute.
Nice, man. Yeah, I watched some of your public speaking stuff, and I think it's just incredible. So you're actually a doctor too. Mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Not a medical doctor.
Yeah.
I'm a researcher. I'm not that kind of doctor. So I got my PhD from Michigan State University. So go green to all the Spartan fans out there. My PhD is in higher education, but really my research is all human resource performance based. So I look at how work-life balance, specifically work-life flexibility, impacts like employees' job satisfaction, their level of staying at the company, right? The turnover rates and everything having to do with that piece. So before the pandemic, to put into perspective, before the pandemic, I was already advocating that people telecommute more and that they could do work differently. And it took a pandemic for it to happen for a lot of folks and for companies to see that you can actually still be productive and sort of just to realize all the lessons that we're learning right now in the digital space. And I think when this pandemic is over, and it will be over at some point, who knows when, but it will be, that it'd be interesting what work schedules look like, because I think I don't think most people want to go back to work 5 days a week. I think everyone wants some level. I've always said people want some level of flexibility, and if they have a 9 to 5, they wanted some level of flexibility, whether it was being home once a week or just being able to switch the schedule as their life permitted that given week. And I think you're going to hopefully see more of that and less of the getting up and 2 hours on the road commuting and all the fun stuff that happened before this.
So in all your research and just kind of you went to school for a long time for that, was there something specifically in it all that really kind of excited you or kind of piqued your interest, or what was your main motivation, or what you like about it?
I fell into it, right? So I started my PhD research, and I thought I was aiming to study the finance of collegiate athletics, specifically football, because that was my background. And I wanted to know why schools brought on football programs when they usually lost money. Like for every Michigan and Ohio State, there's a bunch of even D1 schools that don't make any money, right? And the answer is really quickly, it's a promotional tool. They want to get on ESPN. So there wasn't much to that, and it was too close. So I started off doing work life. Honestly, I was just taking a qualitative methods course, which is pretty much like non-statistics and research and people's stories. And I just wrote this piece about my experience working in colleges and how I was burnt out and how I dealt with it. And I had a professor that said that this is really good. You should probably look at getting this work published. And that just sort of took me down the rabbit hole of looking at work-life balance issues, first in my specific profession. Then I realized really quick, I thought I was just studying this thing to get my PhD, and I would go to dinner parties and people would say, what do you study? I'd say work-life balance. And they would actually be interested. I realized the whole world is burnt out. So that was my starting point of what was interesting. And I think for me, I always gravitated to just flexible work. We've all been in meetings that just don't need to happen, or they're way too long, or, we are doing tasks that just don't make any sense. We all have this idea that our work could be done differently. And then we add that to our personal lives. And we probably all had that supervisor who is by the book or believes you got to put in 70 hours of work or whatever their magic number is to be worthy. And I just always that's always what bothered me. So as I researched it, I said, wouldn't it be great if we could do things, if employees had a little bit more agency in how their work was done, and they could still be productive? And I think that's the athlete in me saying, in football, every play is an objective. You have an objective, right? And as an employee, I was often the same way. What do I need to do? When's it due? Due in January, do February 10th. All right, I'm going to make sure I get it across the goal line for you. but I like to be left alone before that. So that's what interested me. So I started researching all these, results-oriented work environments and these flexible schedules and what that did for employee productivity. And the answers was largely really positive. So that's what really got me into it, and really thinking about it and studying companies and organizations that employed it successfully.
Nice, man. Well, I'm an entrepreneur and all I do is work and have no life. So do you have
So
any
there you
tips
go.
for balancing and getting back on track, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, so for entrepreneurs and anyone that's really self-directed in their work, it's the option. So some of the same principles apply in terms of like, you're ultimately the author of what you need to do. I think for those that are entrepreneurial, solopreneur sort of roles, I think there's two things you really have to do well. Number one is you have to really define your boundaries and stick to that, right? Like what's sacred to you and what are things you will do and what are things you won't do. And you really need to consistently ask yourself that and fine tune it, but then stick to it, especially like daily. I believe in what I call sacred time. Whatever sacred time is for you on a daily basis, you need to do it. For some people, I need 5 minutes. Like we talked about coffee, right? Like my 5 minutes with my cup of coffee, and please, I just need the world to shut off for 5 minutes. And it seems so simple, but if you don't get that, you feel like the whole day is off kilter, right? So there's these little things. For me, my sacred time is time I spend with my children before bed, right? Like it's that 10 minutes, sometimes it's only 5 minutes, but it's that time that we get to hang out. And I usually leave my phone in another room and I just hang out with them, so I'm fully present. So I think the boundaries piece is there. And I think related to boundaries for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs is outsource or contract hire, whatever you hate to do in the long run, you just need to like not do it, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. Is if I know when you're starting up, you're trying to like do it all, and you might not have the startup to do it all, money to do it all, but make a plan quickly to exit it, because I just got my new websites up, and for probably the first up until this year, I was always doing my own website, and I hated it, right? And WordPress was such a pain in the butt, and then finally I hired someone to do it for me, and it's like at some point I'll show people like the before and after, like it's night and day, like it's way better. And I'm not stressed having to do it. And I can send her something and say, hey, can you upload this, or we change this? And it happens. And I don't got to worry about plugins. And so I think that's an important lesson as well, is to do it. And I would say probably the third thing that's probably related to that is, especially in business, like if it's anything like the speaking business, in the speaking business, you go to a seminar on how to be a profitable speaker, and they'll give you 110 ideas that you should be doing every single one. It sounds like you need to be doing every single thing on that list. The reality is you got to figure out what makes sense for you, and you don't have to do it all, and get really good at doing one thing well first before you try to expand it. Because when I started out, I was website and like a weekly blog, and then I had a weekly newsletter with a video, and then YouTube on top of that. I was trying to do it all. And I was burning out. And I wasn't doing anything well. I was just treading water. So even now, my bread and butter is really outreach to potential clients, and I'm doing a little bit on social media, and even that I'm strategically sort of figuring out what that looks like.
Yeah, just the phrase "sacred time" has like paused my whole mind. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta put some sacred time in my life.
That one resonates with a lot of people. So what's your sacred time, and what does that look like for you? What have you done to defend it, right? Because I do seminars, and and I often ask people like, what do they value? Like, what are their values? What do they value most? And we go through an exercise, and almost everybody picks like family, health. Like family and health are usually number 1 and 2, and I'm like, I really kind of rile people up. I'm like, so this is important. Like, you sure it's important? Yeah. I'm like, how many times have you compromised this thing in the last 60 days? And everyone's like, oh, it's just most of the time the energy in the room, it's like,
I'm bad.
Right. When I said, you're like, right. And it's how we do it. I'm like the work-life guy, but like, my son, especially when he was younger, would come up to me, and it wasn't even things he said sometimes. It was at a younger age, just things he would do. Like he would come down and sit next to me, and he would start typing on his tablet. Like he didn't know how to type. He didn't even have the keyboard up. But he was just like, and I said, what are you doing, man? Oh, I'm writing, I'm working on my computer like daddy. Like that's funny, and it's cute. It's adorable, but it's powerful, right? Like these pieces that I talk about work life and spending time with my kids. But what my kid is learning from me and seeing is that I'm consistently working, and he is sitting next to me because he is pretending to type like me because he wants to engage. And I thought, wow, that's one of the elements that got me thinking about, how I end the evening with my children, how I spend time when I'm present in the house.
Yeah, totally. Best to be present with everything you do, I feel like. So I definitely am all about trying to, free people, have more time, be more doing what you want. So I'd love to hear your take on living life on your terms and things like that.
Yeah, so life on your terms, phrase I love. I think ultimately that's what we all want in some form. I think you have to start, number one, with answering the question, what do you want your life to look like? And I think you need to take a really hard look at that and be serious about it. This current moment in your life, what do you want it to look like? And really think about everything, right? From your daily interactions to, the job, how you want your time spent, all these pieces. And then work from there, because you have to compare what you want it to look like with where you're currently at. Most of the time, there's some sort of mismatch. Sometimes it's like night and day. Sometimes it's not that far off. But you start by answering that question, and then you look at where pieces are off. And when you look at where the pieces are off, then you got to start creating an action step or action steps to get that gone, right? You have to prioritize, and then you have to make a change. So if you want, let's just say hypothetically, because we talk about time a lot, right? Let's say you want more time, you want to be working less in your job. You got to sit down and analyze, how do you go from 60 hours to even 45 hours a week, right? Like, what are the blockages, right? And then we talked about some of those. Could be I need to hire someone to do some stuff so I can free up my time. It could be I can stop quitting what I need to quit something I'm doing to do that, right? And then you create the action steps. You create what I call power steps, which in football, the power step is the first step you take on any given play. And it's like only 6 inches. It's a 6-inch step, but it's fundamental, especially for those that play on the line. But any player, like it's fundamental to just everything you do on that play. You can't be successful without it. And that's the same thing. What's the power step you need to take to go in the right direction? So if we're looking at the how to offload workload question, it could be as simple as I'm going to Upwork and I'm going to post a job, or even just research what that is. That's the power step, right? If it's like you have a boss, it's looking at who else is in my role doing this similar work, but doesn't seem to be working as much as me, and why is that, right? Investigate that. I'm surprised. I'm doing right now, conducting interviews with people that want to correct their work-life balance. And so the long-term goal is to create an online community with that, and sort of an e-course mastermind group with that. And I found that people that are in like office jobs or have some sort of boss and feel really stressed out and feel like they have all these requirements put on them for their time. I'm finding that often when we just get talking a little bit more, they'll say, but so-and-so has like a similar job to me, and they can say no all the time, or they don't have as much work. They seem less stressed. So there's something there, like even when you feel like it's always the boss coming on you, I think looking at what makes other people able to maybe do the job in less time. And sometimes what are they willing to sacrifice to get there? Because the reality is in some work environments, it could be promotion in that current place. It could be you're willing to sacrifice complacency with having to negotiate a lot more with your boss consistently. But if the end game of that negotiation is 15 less hours a week, that's fine. So, I mean, I think that could just come back to your initial question. It's about really just figuring out what the baby steps are. And then from there, once you get used to doing these baby steps, and once you get used to negotiating what you want, it becomes so much easier. It becomes second nature. Like, I have no problem saying no to a meeting, for example, that I don't want. If I don't want to do something, I just don't. 10 years ago, that was really hard to say, right? People would ask me to volunteer on their boards, do charity work, let's have a meeting back when I used to work like in higher education. It was always like, let's form this committee. We want you to go to this task force meeting. And I would tell you, oh, sure, yeah, you got it, boss. And I would be there. And you would learn real quick that like nothing would really get done. It wasn't important to be there. So I just experimented one day and just started saying no to things. Now, what if I don't go? What if I just say, I don't want to be on that? And there, for me, I found that there was no real repercussion. I found that.
That's what I was going to ask you. What happens when you say no? What's it like, man?
It's painful, and sometimes you will get some pushback, and that's fine. You're going to, right? But listen, what I love about children is that children will say no to anything they don't want to do, and it's really hard to change their minds. And we lose that as we grow up, because we're kind of beaten into saying yes, right? If you have a young child, watch them from they're 2 years old to when they're about 7 or 8, and they go through like the education system. Like you're conditioned to like not say no to anything that you're asked to do. It's because we don't want rebellious classrooms. But so it's hard, and you sometimes get pushed back. And I was in work environments where there's a stigma, like he's not gonna, he doesn't work as hard because he doesn't want to be here for 12 hours on a Saturday. But I was okay with that, because again, what do I want my life to look like? Well, in the long term, I don't want my life to look like this. Like, this is not going to be part of my 10 years plan, right? I'm not going to be at this place in 10 years, and I'm going to do good work. And that was for me always the piece. I did good work. So if I had to come into a meeting with my boss and their biggest criticism was, you need to work more hours, which rarely happened, by the way. I don't believe it ever happened in my life. But like, if that someone were to get that, usually it was my boss's boss. Well, he seems to not work as much as some other people. But she was always able to say, but like, he gets everything he needs done, right? He's about being productive. And I think that it's a big one. But again, you got to look at it long. Listen, if you're working for a boss who wants to grind you into the ground, working 60, 70 hours a week, that's probably not where you're going to want to be long term. So if you have to eat the poop sandwich, do it for sure. I'm also realistic, right? You got bills to pay, but this idea that we're going to do this for 10 or 15, 20 years and then things are going to get better, it's not going to get better, right? So you got to be like, I'm going to put up with this for 6 months. What's your exit strategy with that, right? What do you want your life to look like? My life was always about being debt free. And and to get there, that required in the short term sometimes taking on jobs or doing tasks that I didn't want to do, and then sometimes saying yes to things that were strategically smart. Like, why don't you sit on this task force? The president of the company's leading it. Yeah, I'm going to be on that. It's probably not very productive, but I'll be on it, right? Like, you got to play a bit of a game, but I also think that in the long term, like, I'm not going to retire at this place, and I need to get here until I hit this financial benchmark, and then I'm going to start looking for the next phase in my baby steps plan. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, man. Dropping some wisdom, sacred time. I really liked the idea of the power steps. You mind telling me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the power step is just any goal. Let me rephrase that. Whenever we want to go after a goal or a dream, we always think about the end game, right? Like it's Covey's, begin with the end in mind from the 7 Habits, right. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm a huge 7. It's like one of my favorite leadership development books of all time. I feel like most authors are still just trying to copy it, right? So everyone, because that's what all the books now. Before Covey, there was no like 8 steps to this. Now everyone's got step formulas. So he was the originator of a lot of that. But begin with the end in mind is great. You need to do that. Again, you need to envision it. But the problem, the disconnect often is like, I want to be, in my case, I want to be a super successful speaker. And in my mind, I know what that looks like. And you see that end game, and it's really motivating, but it can also be really frustrating and demotivating, because in your mind, you're seeing yourself with 18 million subscribers, and you're doing some sold out show in the Tokyo Dome or whatever it is, right? And you're like, okay, and today I'm speaking at the the Brighton Rotary Club, and there's 8 people in there, 6 of who are there for the meal, right? Like nobody cares. And the waitresses interrupted me. And by the way, real thing, wasn't Brighton Rotary, they're awesome, but it was and so you think about like, I want to get to the Tokyo Dome. So how do I get there? And so for me, the power step is all about breaking down your journey into small, manageable steps, and breaking down the process piece by piece. And you do that in at least one. You always start out with doing it in the most important area. And then, as you get better at it, you can take on like a second area, but it's usually like one thing at a time, one step at a time, and just break it out. Like one of my first power steps in speaking was just to research, literally just how to research how to do this for money. Right? How to get more bookings, right? How to, and that was just the Google search in itself was a power step, because I hadn't done that. And then I did it, and then you start learning, okay, what's the next step? Join this association, right? Get practice at this organization. That's why I joined an organization called Toastmasters, right? So that's where I went to get my practice. So you send those emails out, you go to those meetings, right? What's the power step now? Now I got to join this. I like it. I want to join this organization. You join the organization. What's the step now? Well, they have a curriculum, or they have, so you go through these processes in these different streams. But you just look at like, what's the next step? Because you already know what the overall objective is. You already know what your big goals are, but you just got to break it down. And again, the metaphor is awesome, because they're so foundational, right? And I know a lot of speakers who, for example, will just throw themselves out there when they're starting their career. And I'm just going to go out on stage and just kind of wing it and figure it out. And that's like, you can do that, but there's so many better ways, to come. That's usually when they'll come to me for advice. There's so many better ways to do it. So that's it's just small, manageable steps, because that's how it's done. It also breeds consistency. Certain things that are part of that. Like, I mean, for me, I have a simple rule that if anyone emails me specifically, especially clients, but I try to answer all my emails by the end of the day, especially the most important ones, the ones I prioritize, like their potential clients, setting up meetings. I try to make sure anything that's an inquiry, I get to it every day, right? That took time though, right? That took a lot of time to get that, but now that's ingrained in me, so I have a process. And that was just through taking a baby step, because before that, I would be like, I'll get to it sometime this week. And that's not a baby step. That's
right.
A disaster.
That's putting it off. Procrastinators unite tomorrow.
Yeah. Or you're putting it off because you're not putting it off. You just got these you're not focused. So you're just jumping from one fire to the next. And so by the time you get to it, it is 3 days, and you've legitimately been working on other things. But, some people needed that answer 3 days ago, and it's just a hot mess.
Tells about who you are. So that kind of segues into what I really want to talk about next, which is your motivational speaking. So for like the wannabe speakers out there, like myself as well, I want to do speaking. I know you join groups or whatever, but what is your steps? Like, do you write a speech beforehand? Do you get motivated and then do it? Do you reach out? Like, what have you found that is really works, or what are some steps that you take that you found to be successful in that? Obviously pandemic not happening.
Well, pandemic though, I am still speaking, right? It's a different stage, but it was there. And again, virtual speaking was happening before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a terrible transition for me because I was ready and I was prepared. But that comes out of, again, years of baby steps and years of just working your craft. So there's a few things you have to do, I think. My process when I give a speech, I don't actually write out my speeches usually, unless I'm really struggling with the concept and I need to just write it out. But I treat speaking like I would fitness. And you need to go to the gym every day or 5 days a week, whatever that magic number is for you. And
Wow.
and so if I'm not practicing like speaking at like say Toastmaster clubs or civic orgs where you don't get paid, but just a place for an audience to share ideas, to sort of try new material, always part of what I do. And I think that's helpful. If I don't have those venues or something's like a really rough idea, I'll literally go in my basement. I'll take the recorder on my phone and just record myself, and I'll just start speaking a concept, and I'll just start talking about it. And for me, the strategy is to do that same story for about a week, because at the end of the week, if you've done it verbally a few times and then you've recorded yourself a few times and you listen to it, you'll start to hear what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and what then you can start refining it into 2 or 3 or 5 minute chunk, depending on what you're using that for, right? And so but I think that process of working on your stuff, whatever that looks like for you, has to be consistent, because when you get to a stage in front of real folks that are there to see you and there for the event, that you want to be a little bit polished. And so that's one piece, 100%. When you get to like larger presentations, again, I have a formula for that. That's sort of similar to that. It's about certain groups I go to practice my presentations, and certain smaller associations for people that will not pay you, but usually they might cover expenses, but they're just happy to have folks from the outside kind of present. If you can, and there's lots of local ones wherever you live. Like practice a workshop there. If you're talking about, like for me, with some of my balance stuff, that's where I would test some of those out, because I knew, again, everyone's burnt out. So what does it look like for social workers versus managers, right? So you find these smaller associations that you can tell just by the way the conference is, they typically don't have a budget. And that's, again, your goal is to get practice and build your network. So I would do that. So again, working your practice, I think, is really important. I think at some point, most great speakers need a coach, right? I've gotten coached in the past, not just both on presentation skills and business skills, but on the presentation and get coaching. Like I like working with emerging speakers. That's like one of my markets. My main market is those that are trying to get into speaking, helping them figure out how to get into it, like what's their entry point, what are the groups they want to target, but then putting together the speech. And I think it's helpful because someone who's been successful at it and can teach it, because those two things are not like, you want both, right? But if I had to go from one of the two, you got to go to someone who can teach you how to put it together. And so when you have someone that's a good fit and can teach you how to put those talks together and what to think about, I think that helps elevate your game and gets you out of your own space. Because if you're your only audience, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it. And I think the third part to think about is just, I made this mistake. So it's from experience. I got this advice from Eric Thomas, who's one of the most, successful motivational speakers. ET, man. ET, like sat next to me in stats class when I was doing my PhD, right? We're doing our PhD.
No way. That's awesome.
So I didn't really quite know. He had blown up, but not quite blown up the way he is now. But we talked. And so, he's been very generous. And I just remember the best advice he's ever given me was leverage what you know. And because he came from education, he said, he started a lot in education and then built his way out of it. And that's when I employed that strategy, that was way more successful for me versus me at the beginning trying to go corporate. Like, why won't Bank of America hire me? And unless you have a very specific topic that you can relate to them on or that they need, for example, certain forms of diversity could be good right now, then it's harder to break in without that sort of shared experience or having an inside contact on it. But so wherever you're at, if you want to be a speaker, start in your groups, in your communities, in the associations you're a part of, professionally, or even just in terms of identities or things you like to do. I mean, if martial arts conferences hired motivational speakers and paid them, I would be doing, if they had such a conference, I would go, because I'm a lifelong martial artist, right? Like I talk a lot about football, but like my martial arts experience so much, gave me so much foundation in my own self-confidence. I mean, martial arts is the reason I had the courage to even walk onto a football field, right? So, but those are like communities that you can at least have some shared experience with. And it's always easier to start your material with groups that you have some shared experience. It makes the jokes easier to write. It makes the examples easier to come up with, right? Instead of, imagine just whatever group, right? Like if I had to go talk to accountants today, and I've talked to accountants, but trying to find what I have in common with accountants just off the bat, is a little trickier, right? I have to really
Yeah.
dig for that. Whereas, high school teachers or college educators or, things like that, trainers, that's easier for me to figure it out because I've got that shared experience. So really leverage it. And I think if you put those three pieces together of work your material every day, get a good coach, and leverage where you know to start, I think that's what elevates you as a speaker right off the bat.
Kind of find your story also and find your audience that kind of
Find your story. Most people know their story though. And usually in one session with me, I can identify it really quick. It's the audience part can be sometimes a little bit tricky. And again, baby's power step. What's the one type of audience, at least to start, that would be a good fit? Go there. So if you're, I don't know why the term circus performers came in, but theoretically, if you're a circus performer, you want to be a speaker, then look up the circuses. So find that's your niche, go after it. And then don't worry about everything else. Just find that one audience, like broadly, that would want that. And there's an association and a group for everything. So there's no need to try and target 10 at the beginning. Target like the one that you think would be a good fit, and they'll go for there. I've been doing this 15 years, probably 10 years as like a serious speaker. And only now am I starting to look at healthcare, because healthcare workers and even law enforcement, like basically public servants, are super burnt out, right? And super, and so, but it took me 10 years to sort of figure, A, get the confidence, and B, say, okay, I've got a good enough body of knowledge. I think now this is a good time to sort of venture into that world.
Yeah. So for the work-life balance, I mean, when you focus on people that are burnt out, what do you tell them to do first? Like we already talked about it pretty much, just like find your sacred time, power steps, like say no. Yeah. Sometimes I'm burnt out, you never know. Sure. Everybody's burnt out. Like
everyone's burnt out. Boundary. It's boundaries. I think it all starts with boundaries. And I think it comes back boundaries. What do you want your life to look like? And I think the third one to add is who are the important people in your life? And if you ask them, right? Like just ask them or even talk to them. It doesn't have to be a question, just have a conversation. And I think that helps give you perspective. But I think ultimately, if you're burnt out, it's usually it's a time issue or a boundary issue or both. And the thing is, when you analyze your time, like I could take you through a time analysis activity where I'll say in a given week, try to break down everything you do and give it a time code, right? So like how many hours a day do you spend eating or, driving or whatever it is. And I know with COVID, that number is different, but it still applies, right? I mean, but like analyze where are you spending your time and then looking at that and going like, where am I spending way too much time? Where can I make more time? I think that's, you have to start with those types of questions. And then at some point, no matter how you got to say no to something. At the end of the day, if you're burnt out, you are saying yes to too many things, or you are allowing things that do not give you joy, do not give you energy to take over your life. So something needs to change, right? It's saying no, it's altering. It's, I think sometimes letting go. I think especially as entrepreneurs, we get attached to ideas and we get attached to things that we've been doing for a long time, and we don't. It's just hard, right? It's like hard. It's hard to let go of that because we feel like it's become a part of us. It's much like that trinket that you don't like, you don't use it, but for some reason you never want to throw it out. It just becomes attached, right? Like you have it in your house, like, I don't really care about it, but I don't want to throw it out. It's perfectly good. So we have this thing emotionally, we get attached to tasks and pieces of who we are, even pieces of our business that are not profitable, right? I mean, when I started speaking, I had like 8-9 topics. Why? Right? But you just have to let go. You kind of have to let go of who you are now to become the person you want to be in the future, and that's really hard for some people. And in some cases, it's deeper than just a task or two. It's you need to let go of your profession or being a manager. You need to let go of this concept of who I am now is who I need to be. Like I have to, in my mind, build on top of that, and that you just have to find a way to let it go. And then I advocate for people if you need some sort of counseling, like a professional to help you let go of that, reach out, find a professional to do that, because some of these things are deep-rooted psychological issues from a mental health standpoint. And I just think from an identity is a weird thing. I haven't played college football and since I don't want to, almost 20 years now, but I still see myself as a college athlete, right? And then so it's still part of who I am as a speaker, but that's an ingrained identity. So you think of someone who maybe has been in management for 15, 20 years and wants to go off on their own, or they've been doing speaking on this topic for so long and they really like it and they're really good at it, but maybe it's just not yielding profitability for them, right? And so, but they still want to really put a lot of energy, and that's what's stressing them out, because that's the thing that could actually free up time in their lives and not burn them out. But you have to let go of that.
Yeah, wow, that was very profound. I think so many problems are just brought up by people carrying around their old baggage. I mean, it's just like our biggest thing is letting go. Like it's such a hard deal for everybody, I think, and some people especially more. I guess I wanted to pick your brain. Are you finding virtual places to do speaking now
Hmm?
in the pandemic area? And do you have any
Yeah.
tips on finding stuff like that?
Most associations right now are having hybrid or virtual meetings.
Really?
There's talk about, yeah, most are doing virtual. A couple are doing high. Anything in person is always touch and go right now, right? Because every week
Mhm.
something changes, the state changes,
Yeah.
right? And as a speaker, I don't really intend to be on a live stage for probably 2022. I don't realistically, and for the sake of my family at this point, don't want to really do that. But there are opportunities out there to speak. There are associations looking in their meetings. The great thing about speaking virtually, there's two things I think I really like about it. Number one, you don't got to spend half your life in an airport, so that's really nice.
Yeah.
But I think the other part is I theoretically could speak in 5 places in a day. I think mentally that would be a little draining, but I think you could, right? I could do an hour keynote now might take 2 hours of my day at that given association by the time I prep and do the thing. And then afterwards, if I'm even hanging out in the Zoom room after I'm done, right? Some places like, hey, thanks
Yeah.
everyone for coming, end meeting. So, you can actually speak and influence more places. And there's a lot more virtual opportunities. Paid wise, I mean, every association is different. I mean, some associations have lost a lot of members because professional development budgets get cut, but the opportunities to get out there are there, and so I think that's really. I think that's a real positive piece to it. I think the other part for me is, for me, I just again like our last point was let go of who you are. I don't need to be on a stage to be a speaker and to be a teacher, right? And so for me, before the pandemic, I was looking at doing online community or some sort of mastermind on specifically on life balance, and now I'm starting to put that into motion and looking at folks to interview to create a course that's customized to them, and then parlay in that into some a different kind of speaking, a different kind of presence. So I think it's just about getting creative in the speaking space about how you can.
Yeah.
How you can get that experience. It's a great time to build your brand. I think it's a
Mhm.
great time to experiment and figure out who are the folks that are for you. And I think that's something on its own is really valuable.
Yeah, I love it, man. You got me motivated to go look at some like digital summits or do some speaking or something
Yep.
like that.
Yeah.
That's just they're out there. I already know, and I've already talked to people about it, but I didn't really think about it as it could be a great way to leverage, public speaking, and but when you're in
Yep.
front of everything. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Why don't you tell everybody like the best places to find you online and just how to get in contact with you?
Sure. A couple places to go. Of course, number one, paulartale.com. That's PAULARTALE.com. And that's my main website. You can see clips of me speaking. You can see all stuff about me there. And then learn a little bit more about me. And then of course on social media, find me on LinkedIn. I know some of this will be in the show notes, but find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, we're all the things. All the major platforms I'm on them. I'm heavier on LinkedIn more than anything else in terms of usage. And I would say, of course, every Monday, I have a podcast myself called Fiercely Successful. It's literally me in my basement just ranting into a mic for 15 minutes. So
I like
it's actually one of the
it.
ways I practice. That's where I get some of my stories, and that's the reason I created it. With those that enjoy my stories, that's where I go. It was funny. Last year, it's probably 2 years ago. I did a Facebook Live for 90 days, just telling whatever came to my mind for
Mhm.
that. And I said, well, I just turn that into. Why don't I just turn that into a podcast? So I kind of did. But Fiercely Successful episodes drop every Monday. Now in January, I'm retooling. But from February on, season one's already up on my website. Look that up. It's available where all good podcasts are available. And I would say if anyone is interested in either number one, if you're looking to be a presenter, you want to up your speaking game, then get in contact with me. Go to my website. If you go to the store page, there's packages there already, or just go to the contact form. Contact me. Let's do this. Go to my website, hit the contact form, and fill that out, and we'll set up a free 30-minute consultation just to sort of help people. I like to point people in the right direction. I think that'll be a good place to start. So if you want to up your speaking game, do that. And then same thing, if you want to, if you're looking for improvement on your work-life balance, then go to the website, fill out the contact form, and we'll set up a work-life sort of focus call and help people point them in the right direction.
Awesome, man. Just one last question, and then we'll get out of
Yep.
here. But what I've been asking people is, what does gratitude mean for you, or what's your definition of gratitude?
Gratitude. I think gratitude's a practice.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to define the word itself, but I think it's a practice and being mindful of the good things in your life. And as much as I used to make fun of Oprah and the gratitude journal, it was kind of hokey, and it kind of still is. But like now I have it in I have a Word doc. I have a doc on my phone where I write things I'm grateful for on some sort of. I'd like to say it's daily. It's not daily, but when I have a thought, I put it in. I think that's it's a practice, I think, more than anything. Versus, think of even doing it once a week versus doing it at Thanksgiving. Right. There's a difference in terms. It does change your perspective on the world. It gives you perspective on different things. So I think, to me, gratitude's a practice.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're a rock star. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm sure everybody got a lot of great value and nuggets out of there. So talk to everybody later. Take care.
Thank you.